So officially, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the final Value Legal Theory Group meeting in this calendar year. It's a great honor to welcome Cuizhu Wang from Jagiellonian University. Topic of today's lecture is the operational definition of institutional belief from theory to expectations. Professor Wang is assistant professor at Faculty of Law Administration, Jagiellonian University. Just before I continue, Professor, can you hear us? Because at this moment...
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Professor Wang finished her PhD in philosophy and her master program in comparative moral psychology and cultural studies. And as you can guess, based on today's topic, she mainly works on experimental philosophy, philosophy of social and behavioral sciences, social philosophy, social ontology, and moral psychology. Professor Wang currently works on a research project which is titled Ethics of Institutional Beliefs, funded by Polish National Science Center. And I'm guessing that she will spend some time introducing the project, but just briefly, idea is to have interdisciplinary approach in investigating the issues of the ethics of belief for individual agents in the social domain, both theoretically and empirically. And before I give floor to Professor Wang, the format of the meeting is probably known to all of the audience, or to all of you in the audience. We have 30 minutes of the lecture and 30 minutes left for the discussion. And without any further ado, I'm leaving the floor to Professor Wang.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I don't know how to address your name. I don't see any audience because I'm using a laser display in the background of my computer to present. But thank you very much for the very detailed introduction of myself. As this professor just introduced me, my name is Cuizhu Wang. You can also call me Dawn. I hope you can all see my slides. If by accident, if the slides stop to show, please give me some verbal indication. Okay, great. So let me just get started right away. As the introduction also indicated that my presentation today is part of the funded project I'm working on at Jagiellonian University now. And today's presentation mainly focuses on the theoretical work in collaboration with Simon Graf from University of Leeds and Konrad Werner from University of Warsaw. I also have to apologize that I had this norm in my mind that if I was given 1 hour slot, I thought I was expected to talk for 45 minutes instead of half hour. So in case I run out of time, please also bear with me because I did prepare a lot of content for this talk. Great, so let's dive directly into the outline of today's talk. I also need to stand up because whenever I present, I need to get the energy flow when I stand up. So I also apologize for that. Make sure you can hear me and you can see the slides. Great, so the outline for today's talk, I will give you a brief introduction of the project and the sub-project which under presentation today. And then we'll focus mainly on the theoretical work. And then I'll briefly, if time allows, mention the experimental setup, operationalizing the theoretical work, and then we'll conclude. So just give you a little bit background of the whole project. So the project is entitled as Ethics of Institutional Belief. And under the project, we have a couple of deliverables. Two of the main ones I'm responsible are one book project, which is currently undergoing. So the work today contains two chapters of the book. So one is theoretical, the other one is empirical. And we also have a topical journal invited by Synthesis, and I welcome all of you. If you find this topic interesting or fits your research expertise, you're welcome to submit. The deadline is September 30, 2024. So today's presentation demonstrates I call it a sub-project, which I put together two groups. One is a group of philosophers, and we call them theoretical theorists, so a theoretical team, and the other group stands for the experimental scientist group. And this project is called An Operational Definition of Institutional Belief. So here are the theorists, myself, Simon Graf, and Konrad Werner. And here's the experimental team where we have a legal theorist and the experimental scientists. Great. Okay, so let's look directly into the theoretical work we're working on. So the main goal of this theoretical, so philosophical chapter is to give an operational definition of institutional belief. So in order to elaborate what our work is mainly about, and the main four sections will focus on the three questions on the slides, as you can see. So the first is to give you a brief introduction of the theory belief, which we adopt in supporting the goal of our project. And the second is to show you two philosophical theories we put together in developing our concept of institutional belief. And then section 4 will show you what are the conditions formally allows us to empirically investigate such beliefs. Great. So the first concept in this theoretical work is to select a theoretical framework in understanding what do we mean belief. So the theory we adopted in our project is the intentional stance developed by Dan Dennett. We also, social ontologists also call it interpretationism. So give you a basic idea in case some of you may not be familiar with the philosophy of mind. Intentional stance is just literally a predictive strategy in making sense of behavior of a certain system. So it makes sense to treat some entities from the intentional stance, and that is systems which are genuine believers. Interpretationism argues that a system qualifies as a genuine believer as long as its behavior is reliably interpretable or predictable from adopting this strategy called intentional stance, and also applying the intentional strategy to the system yields new predictive power that we do not accidentally have. Give you a little bit more detail. So according to intentional stance, taking the intentional stance is to treat a system as if it has propositional attitudes such as belief, desire, preference, and so on and so forth. That is to say, if the intentional stance as a predictive strategy works in interpreting or predicting behaviors of a certain system, then that system has intentional states, no matter what the system is. And the realism account of intentional stance argues that being an intentional system just is being a system that can be interpreted and or predicted using this strategy. I understand it's a bit a mouthful, but this concept will come back again and again throughout this whole section of my talk. So if you're having trouble following me for now, just bear with me for further introductions. So there are critiques in philosophy, mostly on intentional stance. The main two rivals regard intentional stance as a form of instrumentalism. So basic idea is instrumentalism views that propositional attitudes, which basically you can think of the word as belief in contemporary philosophy of mind. So belief ascription is metaphorical according to intentional stance. Therefore, it's only an instrument in predicting behavior, so generate inferences and predictions. Therefore, according to intentional stance set by instrumentalism, beliefs do not exist. Well, in order to respond to such critiques, and then it develops a concept of real pattern and counters that ignoring attributed intentionality, so beliefs or desires or proposition attitude in general, would lead to missing real patterns. Then it argues that the intentional stance is a way of seeing agency in a broad variety of systems, such as thermostat, computers, single organisms, or even natural selections. For some systems, the intentional stance is only optional strategy, whereas for some others, it's required by a full account of reality. Again, let's go back to the very start statement I gave you about what we mean intentional stance. So it's a strategy to make sense of who we are, no matter who we are is a tree, is a plant, or it's a table, or it's humanity, for example. But the basic idea here is the realism account argues that for some system, for example, if here we see, oh, the flowers dying, and you say, oh, the flower wants to take a nap, or the flower desires to sleep. Well, some people use such language. Then in this case, we're not, although we're using the term desires or wants to, in predicting the behavior of the flower falling asleep or actually dying, it's optional. However, if you want to make sense of some other system like humans or currently non-supervised robot in AI system, then we have to adopt intentional stance in order to understand that system. So that's the basic idea of real patternhood in defending intentional stance, way of understanding belief as realistic account. And this kind of realism account is also defended by Dunrouse and Ledman-Rouse, 2007. So based on that, intentional stance is not only interpretation strategy, but also embeds a realist account of existence of belief. So according to the intentional stance, propositional attitudes such as beliefs, desires, are abstract posits that help us to track real pattern. So what belief is doing is to locate a system into environment in order to track the pattern in relating the system with its general or environment. It could be normative environment, it could be biological environment, and so on and so forth. So this is the basic introduction of intentional stance as a philosophy mind in understanding belief in our project. So just give you a very quick conclusion on intentional stance realism. It is not only a strategy for taking an epistemological shortcut in understanding minds, but it's a stronger suggestion that all there is to having a belief that P is being a system that is interpretable and predictable under the assumption that that agent has a belief of that P. So ontologically, to say that an agent X believes P is to assert that X behavior, including verbal behavior, demonstrate a particular kind of regularity, namely just that kind of regularity which can justify the projection of agent X attitudes to the proposition of that P. And methodologically, the propositional attitudes such as beliefs and desires are virtual properties of agents in environmental context, which can be attributed from applying the intentional stance as a strategy. In our work, this concept of environment particularly matters to us is this institutional context. Great, so that's the first part of my introduction on our theoretical work. And so now let's dive into the second part. What do we mean institutional belief? Well, the first question come up to our collaborative work was, do we mean belief at individual level or at collective level? And this is not just a philosophical argument because it directly matters to our statistic modeling and experimental design as the following second part of the project. And we decided to develop an account which can account for both collective level, so society level or group level, whichever term you'd like to adopt here, and individual level. So individual level institutional belief in our concept are beliefs held by individual beings that are shaped by the wider institutional structure the individuals are embedded in. Whereas a collective level individual beliefs are beliefs held by social entities that are shaped by the wider institutional structure that social entity embedded in. And our work hypothesis here is that these two types of beliefs are intimately connected. So here's a taxonomy, hopefully to help you to understand. So when you look at column 1, the separation of row 1, row 2 differentiate between collective level, so we think about society, and versus individual level. And column 2 and column 3 differentiate between whether it is a non-institutional context or institutional context. And in our work, our account try to develop our theory, incorporate both institutional group belief and institutional individual belief. So both collective level and individual level in the institutional context. And the guiding idea for this section is that institutional beliefs are primarily collective level beliefs, which have effects on individuals, and that we can test them in experimental setting. So this is a guiding idea for this second part. And we believe that institutional beliefs emerge as answers to problems that are faced by collectives. Okay, allow me to develop further following this guiding idea. So in order to develop this architect in our main body of this section 2, the first philosophical framework we have to adopt is this group belief hypothesis. So first, let me motivate this group belief concept by example. Here I ask you, what should we make of collective belief ascription? For example, statements such as the college union believes that the industrial action is going to plan. So here you can see there's a group entity called the college union, and there's a mentalistic concept called belief. So there's a propositional attitude towards a certain proposition. Well, according to eliminativism, collective belief attribution as such example demonstrates are merely metaphorical. As I showed you at the very early start, the criticism towards intentional stance have this same proposition. Therefore, eliminativism argues such belief attribution towards a collective being is strictly speaking false. So belief in this sense do not even exist, it's just metaphorical. According to summanativism, collective belief attribution are just a shorthand for saying that some or most or all members of that social entity have a certain belief. So summanativism here focus on what proportion of members in a certain collective being have a certain belief. A realism account argues that group belief attribution really do pick out collective beliefs. And this is the account intentional stance, which we adopt in our work for section 2. So given time constraint, I will not be able to show you all this structure in detail, but just to give you a basic idea that the account of the argument in supporting group belief in our work is, no, it is not metaphorical to use group belief. So group belief exists. And also, we also think that group beliefs are meant, so if we say no, then we are non-eliminativism, right? So when you are non-eliminativism, the first question asked is a member level belief, so individual belief, and group level belief, so what I call collective level belief, independent. So we think, well, mostly, yes, they could be independent, but sometimes they could have share a certain of similarity or consistency. So our account is a weaker position between this yes and no. We accommodate both accounts. On the right side, as the non-summative aspect, the question asks, are group level beliefs reducible to some or some member or to an individual level, right? So we argue that it could be non-reducible. It also could be reducible depending on the context of the belief to be modeled. So yeah, that's the first part of group belief, realism account for group belief. And hopefully this map shows you which part of literature we try to accommodate. The second part of group work on group belief hypothesis includes this supporting the existing group belief includes these two kinds of arguments: divergence account and interpretationism account. Again, we're coming back to intentional stance here again. So I'll just quickly show you how we are going to accommodate both arguments, also in support of our application of group belief hypothesis. So the divergent argument shows that there can be a conflict between an attitude or belief at the society level, at the collective level, versus at the individual level. So you can see there's a shade on the right side on epistemic divergence. We're not focusing on the epistemic divergence. So I will mainly just introduce you the belief divergence account. So according to this account, it seems that we ascribe beliefs to groups, even in cases in which none of the members have the respective belief. So this is the strongest version of non-summationism, right? So it's a complete inconsistency between collective level and individual level. Like I said earlier, our account is in between. We argue it could have the possibility that collective level, individual level totally diverge, but in most cases, according to my hypothesis, there must be a minimal amount of belief consistency at group level and individual level. So here's further detail in supporting belief divergence account. Let's see, how am I good with time? Because it's 5:25. I'll just skip this part, okay? This text is just in support of belief divergence account. So the other argument in support of belief, group belief, as I showed you very briefly 2 slides away, is argument from interpretationism. So the basic idea, let's look at the bottom part. The basic idea is, according to intentional stance, so which I showed you at very early start, all there is to be a genuine believer is being a system whose behavior can be reliably interpreted or predicted, right, according to the intentional stance. That means it does not matter whether the system is one individual being or a society, as long as the behavior, which we can model in a lab, allows us to make an interpretation. It makes sense of that group's behavior. Of course, following certain conditions, for example, rationality, consistency, and stability. which comes a few slides after. So the basic idea is, given this account of interpretationism, it does not matter whether a system can be society level or individual level. Groups can be system, individuals also can be a system according to intentional stance. And we just want to flag that our application of interpretationism as a working hypothesis does not consider any metaphysical consequences, because the main concern in our work is operationalizability of the theory. So here's the end of group belief hypothesis. In adopting this, both a couple of theories and accommodating the arguments in the group belief debate, we have our theory develops hybrid arguments, which combines both divergent account and the interpretationism account. Great. So that's the second part, first section of second part. So now let's quickly look into institutional belief. Here, the key word, as you can see, is institution. Here, great. So I just give you one example, right? So one example of institutional belief goes like this. Our beliefs about circulating preplans and presenting work in progress like today is governed by the institution of intellectual property, as we are all familiar with in academia. Well, what do we mean institutional belief? So in current literature across institutional economics, social ontology, there are two popular accounts institutions. One is called the rule-following approach. The other is equilibria approach. So basically, rule-following approach regards, argues institutions are rules, right, in governing individual behavior in a certain society. Equilibrium approach is the other way in economic literature, argues institutions are equilibrium in which is naturally developed based on interactions in a certain community. So we adopt a different account, complement these two accounts, because we believe that a rule-following approach as a abstract top-down suffers from top-down constraint, whereas equilibrium approach suffers from bottom-up constraint. So we adopt the theory is developed by my third co-author, Conrad Werner, argues that institutions are enablers. So they are not only rules to tell people what to do, they're also not only equilibrium, which kind of generated through hysterical, repetitive individual interaction. They also enable us in a sense that institutions govern the very capacity of individuals to aim at a selective fragment of the world, which requires an act of problematization. So in a sense, institutions guide individuals to focus on a certain domain of the world, because institutions enable us to see that as problems. Okay. Great. So that's a basic idea. I'm just trying to speak very fast in order to guide you not to read my text. Okay, so well, if we adopt such a account institution, then it looks like there are two kinds of beliefs. For example, S believes that P qua individual, and S believes that P qua member. So as you can see here, in this case of qua belief, it also seems that we need different bits of information to understand them. So qua belief also connect them to individuals to a shared problem domain, right? But what are qua beliefs? So in order to explain this, Werner also developed these two concepts of dependency. So one is erotatic dependence, the other is a concept of epistemic dependence. And erotatic dependence is a specific kind of epistemic dependence. So based on these two concepts of dependence, I don't have time to go into it. So this dependency is trying to explain how qua-individuals belief relate to society level, individual level, or institution level, because institution is guiding individual to focus on a certain domain as problems in a social interaction or in a function of a certain institutions, right? So explanation of qua member and qua belief is explained by these two concepts. So based on this theory of institution in our work, our institutional belief are developed as institutional group belief, right? So originally group belief argues that a community C has a belief that P, if we can reliably interpret and predict that group behavior, and also if we earn predictive power of that group, right? Well, on top of that, given the institution, the concept of institution in our theory, then for a given community C, the group believes that P is an institutional belief within that community C if and only if the following conditions are satisfied. So the first one is there's a specific question that P is an answer to. So that's what institution is doing, right? And further two more conditions specifies the erotatic dependency in relating group level and individual level qua belief and qua membership. Great, so section 2 is ended on this slide. So based on application of group belief hypothesis and the theory institution, our account of institutional group belief argues that in cases where members of community C are connected to a shared problem domain, we are able to reliably interpret and predict what that community C is likely going to do via its members, qua members. Secondly, in these cases, we are not able to reliably interpret or predict what some or most of the members are likely going to do without taking the proposition or the perspectives of that community into consideration. So by here, we're able to accommodate and give definition of this relationship as a right corner, which is highlighted in red, as you saw at the very early of the talk. Great, so now let's move on to section 3. I have to speed up. I'll try to be quick. So section 3 focus on one keyword, operationalizability. So given the title is an operational definition of institutional belief, so I just told you what is belief, what is institutional belief, right? Here, let's see how our account guide provides a protocol for empirical investigation of such theory of institutional belief. So in our work, we call it IS conditions. Okay, in order to understand that, again, let's go back to intentional stance. So how does intentional stance work? As I said, at the very start, it's a predictive strategy, right? It's to make sense of a system. So the first step in my teaching is called rationality ascription. Well, according to intentional stance, to treat someone as intentional system, therefore as a true believer, a system who has a belief, is to treat them as rational. Well, in our work specifically, the concept of rationality is interpreted by Ted Zawisky in the following sense. So the following sense focus on the normative environment. So what counts as rational as long as it makes sense in the normative domain. The second application or second step in applying intentional stance, as I also said a few times, is to interpret, right? Is to make sense of a system, no matter it's a system of individual or collective being. Well, in this process, it also requires us to locate observable behavior, including linguistic behavior in an environment. I mentioned environment here specifically to do with normative institutional context. In order to make sense of the agent's behavior, given that agent's goal and available information. So again, here I'm trying to emphasize the concept rationality is nothing to do with the definition of rationality in a mathematical way or as most formal philosophers define. Here, our rationality has a special flavor, right? It's to locate certain behavior in an environment given the conditions, such as a goal and information of an agent to make sense of that observable behavior. And the third application of intentional stance, according to real patternhood realism account of intentional stance, argues that believing itself is doing what? It's pattern seeking. So the pattern seeking here argues that believing itself is a process of is to produce a pattern, right? To get closer to the real pattern hold in a realism account. But of course, if that's how belief, according to intention stance works, then the pattern seeking process does not rule out errors. So it requires that only stochastic dominance of choices that can produce better outcomes of the pattern in expectation. Great. Okay, in our operationalizability account here, well, luckily in behavioral economics, this review preference theory as a formal mathematical model actually is an application of the philosophy mind according to intentional stance. Okay, here are 4 features in supporting my argument here. So let's look at one by one. So the first concept is the intentional stance is to ascribe belief to the system, yeah, based on observable behavior. In assuming that agent has belief and that agent is rational. In economics, review preference theory, it's basically the same. It argues that we can ascribe preferences or consistent set of preferences based on observable market behavior. In economics, we study market behavior, right? So you can see this pattern. Also, we assume agents, the market, the individuals in the market are rational. But again, here, rational does not mean people only love money. That's a very naive way of understanding economics, right? So the pattern here is the concept belief in intentional stance and the concept preference in review preference theory are very basically the same, yeah? And the methodology also requires you have to use observable behavior and you assume rationality, belief, or preference, and it requires certain condition. Well, in review preference theory, the conditions are much more visible. So it's defined as stability and consistency. Well, in philosophy mind, we don't use such word because we don't really use math. In philosophy mind, we just say, oh, it makes sense. It's reasonable, right? In review preference theory, here's definition of stability, consistency. So allows the application of this model to explain agents' behavior as that agents are seeking to maximize certain value, and that value we call them utility. So the third feature, also similar to intentional stance, is that review preference theory also interprets behavior, right? It's based on observer behavior, and it allows the construction of utility function, which is interpretation of preference, empirically from finite choice data. And here, finite is a very important concept because philosophy mind, when we talk about real patternhood, we cannot explain how finite choice data can allow us to seek the real pattern out there. But review preference theory is more powerful and it allows us to model such pattern from finite choice data. And also likewise, review preference theory produce predictive power, of course, by modeling certain behavior. As long as they're consistent and stable, it shows a pattern, then we can use that pattern in predicting what those agents are going to do in other situation. Great, so as I already said, I showed you the synthesis between the intentional stance as a philosophy mind and review preference theory as a philosophy and methodology in modeling behavior in economics. Therefore, according to that, we define the IS conditions in our work as rationality, and specifically, rationality here means normativity in Dennett sense, which was interpreted as Zawitsky, as I showed you briefly earlier, and also in economics is defined as ecological rationality or bounded rationality, according to review preference theory. And the second set of conditions are consistency and stability. Well, there are 7 axioms according to Savage, 1954, and that will be a formal model in supporting what do we mean consistency and stability. And the third one, I call it complexity, but the formal terminology is stochastic error. Basic means the model itself allows for error. That's it. Great. Oh my God. Okay, finally, we have finished this introduction of the theoretical work. I only have 2 minutes according to my dictator behavior. So I'm gonna briefly introduce to you the theoretical experimental setup. Okay, I think that's probably more interesting for experimental legal. Okay. So experimental study here, the goal is operationalize this theory. First is to use this theory in modeling certain legal context in understanding institutional belief. But also we believe the experimental study is also able to support our theoretical work, as I just showed you earlier. The theoretical background in our modeling is to adopt the concept law by heart. And we are going to empirically model institutional belief as articulated by our theory of institutional belief as both collective level and individual level. So as a current step, we are translating the concept into testable hypothesis. So what I mean a testable hypothesis is you have to give very clear condition in allowing such operationalizability of the theory of the theory in concept of law, not the theory of the philosophical model. So we are in progress, and also we are designing experiments. For example, we are designing vignettes, we are designing interactive behavior choice games under the legal setup. So we're imitating what behavior economists are doing. We also will collect not only choice data, we'll also collect empirical and normative belief about those choice data, following Christina Bicchieri's theory of social norms. That was what my PhD thesis was on. And we will also design a couple of treatments in differentiating group level versus individual level. And of course, other treatments to do with the application of belief modeling. This must be my final slides, okay? I really apologize for overriding the time. So the main, a couple of main ideas, if any of the scientists here are considering experimental study. So in our work, I heavily insist on a separation between choice task and belief elicitation task, because they have different features, and of course, belief elicitation task also choice task, but we are in the context of institutional belief, we are eliciting belief about certain behavior in the institutional context, right? So there must be a separation between these two features of data. And also we have to control for certain conditions, not only in a theoretical model, I showed you the IS condition, but also in a model following the conditional normative modeling of beliefs. Great. And yeah, and then two more points mostly is focused on the main thing is belief elicitation. So choice data is less important. So the design is more to do fit the legal context instead of to focus too much on the details of the details in legal situation. And also the design treatments in differentiating between group level and individual level plays a key role because of our definition of institutional belief. Great, so allow me to conclude here without saying anything or read all these slides. I'll just conclude here. And thank you very much for being here. And I welcome any comments, questions, or future collaborations if you're interested in our work or in my work. Thank you very much. I'll get back my chair.
Yeah. You can hear us now.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Wang, for this wonderful lecture. And before I give a floor to the audience to ask questions, I just have a quick statistics to make, since this is the last meeting in 2023. I realized that you are the fourth speaker from the Jagiellonian University this year. Yeah, so we started with Professor Isabella Scott in February. Then we had Marek Jakubiec in April. Then we had Adam Dirda in October. And now we have you as the last speaker in December. So this looks like a tradition to me. And I'm hoping that we will continue in this way in the future. And now it's time for the questions.
Oh, thank you very much.
So Professor Paich has a question.
Don, maybe if you could turn off the sharing and turn on the video, if you don't mind. Yeah, perfect.
Great. Okay.
I actually, it's kind of a question before a question. Could you give me some examples of since this I have some questions about the theoretical setup, but I would like to hear some examples of the experimental design in the sense of in which ways exactly have you figured out so far how to test actually the hypothesis from the theoretical part. And the question is in the sense of how do you go about doing it? Are there questionnaires? You mentioned some games, quizzes, and so on. And what is the main auditorium, who are the ones? How do we call this? The target groups of the experiments. So that's kind of my because I want to have a clearer sense of how this is done in practice. So
okay.
that would be my question for now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Bornian. Am I pronouncing your name right? Bornian.
Yeah, it's a hard name. Boyan.
Thank you.
Boyan.
That's very kind of you. I struggled all the time. Well, I apologize for that. Yeah, thank you for your question. Okay. So very experimental design. Yeah, today I had to speak very fast. So we are let me say yeah, I'm trying to answer you one by one, given 3 points you mentioned. So we have vignettes from the previous experimental work the team has done here, but we have to tailor that specifically following following what theoretical framework we are gonna tease out from the concept law in that specific book, right? So so the hypothesis has to generate from that legal text, which should produce a legal context. And then our vignette has design in fitting those legal contexts. For example, if I don't know law, I don't know anything about legal theory, but for example, if say there's a criminal law and it argues in certain context, people should do this, do that, people in different roles in that legal interaction shall behave in a certain way, then the design of vignette has to somehow be tailored to accommodate that theory, that assumption, yeah? So that has to be specific design for this project. We are still in process. Then behavioral game. So that was my idea. So in economics, you have a bank of behavioral games people play, and then in teasing out certain social preferences in model market behavior. But we don't have any of this in legal theory. So we are hoping to design behavioral interaction following the legal context, and which I also cannot say more because we are still in a process, and there's nothing concrete on that aspect. But no matter the vignette or behavioral game in legal context, is to create a base for individuals in a certain community to report their belief about those behavior, about the context in those vignette questions or in vignette scenarios. So as I said earlier, in this kind of setup, the main thing we're doing is to model beliefs. The games, the tasks, the behavior are important, but they are not fundamental because we're modeling institutional belief. But what is fundamental is a specific legal context, which has to rely on you guys as professional legal theorists or legal philosophers or practice law, for example. The second question, let me speak a little bit about our subjects. So I want to speak about two things relating to the theoretical framework we developed. So given we want to model society level and individual level, so we must be able to collect data at group level, so a society, and also data of individual level. So one way of modeling this is the group, you will throw a group of people into a setup to make decisions. No matter what kind of hierarchical structure allow that decision to make, right? If it's democratic, maybe people have equal voice. If it's dictatorship, maybe only someone at the top have voice. We don't care. We give them institutional setup and they make choices, and we take that back. We say, okay, that shows if that behavior, observable behavior about that group behavior can allow us to model or make inference of the group belief at the group level. But you also, at the same time, you must also order belief at the individual level as members of that group, right? Because in our theory, the belief first at group level, collective level, institutional belief, but it's kind of empty shell if you only model at group level. And what are you going to say if a group have a belief in this kind of experimental study? Because the concept of group is tricky. A concept of group is really to do with network tendency, how intensive those people are related to each other. say we are all academics. We all belong to a certain community, but are we called group? No, it depends. Depends how much I'm connected to you, to what degree I'm connected to you. So only model belief at group level, for me, it's kind of like not very powerful. But what really powerful is you also get the individual level belief, and you compare these two levels. You compare how the group level relates to individual level, and the similarity or the consistency at two levels. So that means we also need to model belief and behavioral data at individual level, and the same subjects from a group. So that's another aspect I think is very fundamental in our work. And another, well, then a very practical consideration in terms of subjects. The real law practitioner might not be possible to be recruited, so we will just be able to run a pilot project in comparing legal students who study law versus students who don't study law. Hopefully we can control for the seniority of those students in a legal context. So yeah, that's a little bit about the subjects as well, in answering your question.
Yes, thank you very much. The second question comes from Julieta Rabanos.
Duška, I think.
Oh, yes. So, Duška, the floor is yours.
Duška. Okay.
Yeah. Or Professor Franeta.
So, I think he's muted. He or she is muted.
She is muted.
Can you unmute yourself, Duška? Okay.
Maybe she cannot because maybe we have to do that? No.
No.
No, now
he's unmuted.
We can't really hear you, Duška.
You're unmuted, but we cannot hear you.
Okay, let's go to the question. Maybe that's
yeah. So we'll go with Julieta's question and afterwards go back to Professor Franeta.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. I think that I could not really follow everything because it's something in some sense new to me, but I was really interested in that. I have a lot of questions, but I have two that are follow-ups from Boyan's questions. One is, I was interested in what you were saying about groups, because at some point at the beginning of your presentation, you were talking about individual level and collective level of belief. Institutional belief. But then at the end, you started calling, even in the presentation, group level.
Yeah, right.
No, but this is not something to say, oh, the presentation was wrong in the sense of there is a discordance. But my question would be in this sense, because you were talking about what constitutes a group, what is the criterion to say like that an aggregation of people can be considered as a group. And this is one of my questions, because I would say that maybe for the framework that you're trying to reconstruct or to construct in itself, maybe what constitutes a group, and if the description of some set of people being a group or not is made by the people or by the theorists. This is my first question. And the second one is that if to consider someone, for example, with this idea of collective level to individual level, if this subject to participate in this relation between like the collective level of institutional belief and the individual level needs to identify themselves as members of the group, or is something that might be this connection between one level and the other, can be even if the person does not identify as member of the group. Thank you very much.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, I would like to have your name so I can address all of you properly.
Yeah, my name is, you can call me Jules.
Jules.
Jules, Yes,
Jokes.
like,
Okay, nice to
thank you.
meet you. Yeah,
Nice to
thank you
meet
for
you.
your questions. Yeah. Great. So yeah, first, to address your what you asked at the very beginning, yeah. So the group belief, the terminology between collective belief and collective level and group belief, it's indeed confusing. So I always use collective level because I do statistics, and yeah, and I call it aggregated data. I don't call it a group belief, but philosophers call group belief. So social ontologists call it group belief. Literally, it's collective level belief. Yeah,
Okay.
so it's the same thing. Yeah. Then in terms of your question on what constitutes as a group, this is a very super interesting question. So yeah, my collaborators and me, we have discussed about this for a long time before we settle on this paper. We don't give, so in typical literature currently across, say, management or economics, basic mostly, or some philosophy texts, when they talk about group, they focus on specific people. So it's a set of organization or a group in a sense as a company or as a country or as a university. And we, because I also study network science, so I not to think that way, especially under now globalization, with this normative dynamic, we are heavily losing groupness of group if we only define group based on humans or physical group, right? So we, in order to accommodate this, we do not give a definition of a group focus based on who those people are, whether they are members, they think they are members or not, whether they are members or not. It doesn't matter. It only matters if their behavior obeys the intentional stance conditions. So the IS condition we developed, our answer to the concept group. Yes. So another analogy, if we take this IS condition out of this context of this paper, you could think of group as it's to do with the density of network. Density, how much me as individual count as a core member of a group, given that group, the members of the group, manifest consistent and stable behavior of that group. So you know what I mean? So this accommodates the dynamic or the personality of the non-static state of groupness of group. Yeah, so that's the beauty of IS condition in our work. So I guess this automatically somehow answered your next question. Do individuals have to identify them as members of institution or members of group? I think most time we don't know. Institutions or individuals, we're not able to know what we believe most of the time, even we do. As philosophers say, most time is post hoc, right? We don't really, also a lot of time we think we are a member of a group, but we probably not, because what we mean group is based on your behavior and how you interact, whether your behavior is governed by a certain institution as functioning, as coordinating your behavior, right? So if I want to identify myself as academia, well, I can't. Only if my behavior shows I manifest a patternhood of academia, then I am academia.
I have a really quick follow-up. Thank you very much for your answers. So my last question would be, there is a univocal relation between group and institution. There is a group for every institution. There is no an institution for every group, but then when your explanation about groupness and this idea of, so it might be that for every institution there is a specific group associated.
I think it could be different kinds of group. I could be multiple dynamic, state of groups. But in this sense, institution even it's more something more concrete. The group, the concept group becomes more abstract, right? More subtle. So yeah, so I think still it depends on the context eventually.
Thank you. Now let's try again with Professor Franeta.
Maybe
No.
let's see.
Meanwhile, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much for this lecture. It reminded me of work of Sally Falk-Moore. If you are acquainted with her theory regarding plural legal systems, and she has a concept of semi-autonomous social fields, which in my understanding is something like your understanding of institutions. So my plan wasn't to go in detail why semi-autonomous social fields can be interpreted as institutions in your work, but maybe you can check it if you are not acquainted with that, because basically in her theory, groups of people are acting as social fields and can make their own norms and influence people's behavior. So it's middle level between states and individuals.
Okay. Yeah, it's like a sub-community, yeah?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I see. Yeah, do you mind giving me the name again?
Yes, I will type it in the chat.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Thank you very much for the literature.
You're welcome.
I'll be the mouth of for this occasion. She wrote her question in the chat. So the question was whether there are any ethical implications of treating groups as individual beings, as having intentions, beliefs, and are they considered in the research? I suppose
that's a good question.
Thank you very much, Professor Franeta. I think I pronounced right. Thank you for the question. This is amazing. I am developing a lot of work for the Synthesis Journal on ethics of normative expectation. But in our current work, we do not have any ethical implication in treating groups as rational. Yeah, I think our work is more like behavioral science. We just want to interpret wrong. We want to understand the legal context, the legal norm in our sample in current students sample in Krakow. There's no ethical work either theoretically or empirically.
So sorry, we were having some technical issues. At some point, the screensaver appeared, so we are now back online, right?
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. No, just a follow up from this last question about the ethical implications, because I was also thinking about when you were going on with your presentation about that if it was as if the collective of the group were in some sense anthropomorphized, like the group is a subject in itself. This is a following from Dushka.
Yeah.
I'm not so sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I didn't get the question, but I can hear you. Yeah.
It was not a question, Phil.
Okay.
It was like the context of discovery of the question. My question was not about the ethical implications of doing this, but the conceptual implications of doing this. Because at some point it's just like, in a sense, talking about the relation between the beliefs of a subject and the beliefs of another subject in the end. Because you're treating the two things in some sense as similar or the same. So in this sense, I would like to ask you whether there are conceptual or experimental implications of doing this.
Okay, let me try to clarify my understanding of your question, yeah? So you were saying, I think I get your first part of the explanation. It feels like we are studying the relationship of belief of subject at individual level and subject at collective level, but somehow they are treated as subjects, right? Just different shape, let's say.
Yeah.
Yes. So let me think. Yes, our account argues that, yeah, these two kinds of beliefs are intimately connected, and the right way to model them is to model collective not first. That's more primary step than make sense of individuals. So yeah, you're right. So what's your question on the ethical aspect of such concept?
No, so sorry, it was not the ethical implications, because that was Dushka's question, but the conceptual or even the experimental implications of trying to treat the two things as similar in the sense of this subjectivization, for example, of groups.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. I think I get your question. This question, my answer to this is fundamentally to do with what do we mean belief? Right? So philosophers fight all the time. What do we mean belief? And humans always think we have belief as something private. We all, because it's subjective, you can feel it, you can, you have your personal experience about it at individual level. But which all totally makes sense. So that's what we call internalistic aspect of belief, right? It makes sense because phenomenologically, we all have access to such entity called a belief. But the problem is, if we think belief is like that, then we cannot model them. I cannot open your mind. I cannot, just do neuroscience. I still cannot get why you feel lonely, why you feel happy, why you have a deja vu, why you have a strange, mental state at some point. So in order to do science, we have to look at a belief differently. So certain philosophers of mind, like the one I presented, Dan Dennett, leading figure as Dan Dennett, believes that, so this is to do with ontologically how to do philosophy as well. So a certain philosopher think, okay, I just sit here, think hard, make sense of conceptualization to know the world. And the other kind of philosopher think, no, knowing what is it has to do with how it works. Right? So a group of philosophers we have to investigate the functionality and the mechanism of a set entity in order to know what is it. And it's a loophole. It's like a feedback loop. You try to investigate how, then you come back, oh, it seems I know what. And then when you know this what, you need to figure out more how question, you come back to see what again. So this way of doing philosophy is more my way of understanding anything in the world. I don't just sit here. So we think of, belief. Then we say, okay, we have to observe behavior. But then when you only behaviorism, so if we only rely on behavior in understanding belief, then we can make all kinds of wrong interpretations, right? Because it's based on my projection, it's based on my epistemic background, my all kinds of biases in my neural functioning system. Then also, it seems if we only observe behavior, we don't really know belief. Then the theory belief has to develop further. That's why this realism account comes into place. So, okay, it's not just a projection. It's not just a tool. It exists, but what is belief? Belief is something we humans develop in mapping the world, mapping the reality. And the reality is like, it's not just, it's to do, how to say, I give you a metaphor of rainforest. Let's say, if you stand in a forest, you don't see rainforest, you just see all the single trees. But then if you look into some video, if you look above in a helicopter, you see rainforest, right? So this metaphor shows the realism account of belief is to do with the perspective, the projectionability, and the scale. So some philosophers call it emergence. So belief is an emergent property based on individual, entity, or interaction. But the realism account argues that belief is just we look into the world and we are seeking a pattern. And the whole process of believing, it's the more information you take in, we are just adjusting the interpretation of the pattern. The pattern is forever real, no matter who see it. Of course, maybe I have all kinds of inability to see the real pattern because I have bias. I have psychological bias as an individual being, and I have cultural bias. But the believing the process itself is just getting closer and closer and closer to the real patternhood. And if we're able to have the computational ability to look above certain property at a certain scale, then we'll be able to get that real existence. And that is belief. So the concept belief become a what? Become a doing. And this philosophy gives us a way to say, oh, okay, then if I get behavior data, maybe I can get infinite behavior data. Maybe I observe you 10,000 times of doing something or a whole life. Then I should be able to mathematically model what you truly believe based on observable choice data. So that philosophy I said earlier, the realism account, gives this way out maybe this is the best way we can do in finding the so-called belief through behavior. So based on this, we can, my understanding, only this theory allows us to actually bring things to the lab to study belief. We cannot just sit here and say, oh, I guess those law students believe something. And that's not going to work if we want to do empirical work. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah, it fundamentally is to do with what do we mean belief? And it's very controversial, I think.
So Professor Wang, thank you very much for this wonderful lecture.
Thank you.
An applause. In the chat, you can find the article which I mentioned. Thank you very much. I wish you nice holidays, Happy New Year, and hope to see you again in next year.
Oh, thank you very much. May I have your name as well? Given you were introducing me and warmly welcoming me, I couldn't.
Yes, of course. I'm sorry. My name is Mila Đorđević. I'm working here at the Faculty of Law on the subject Sociology of Law. So this article is from that subject.
Ah, okay. Okay, Nina.
Mila, but
Mina. Okay.
I will type that.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay, Mila. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for staying with me at the very end of the year at 5 p.m. in the evening, and we're also overdue time-wise to have this discussion with me, to listen to me about my work. I was trying to speak very fast because I actually prepared a lot of content. I also cutted some content. But yeah, thank you for being the audience. And I really also appreciate all the questions because this is very much work in progress. So we need all this intellectual conversation to stimulate more deep thinking for producing better work. So thank you all very much. And yeah, and Boyan, thank you for your invitation as well. I'm very happy to meet you and your colleagues again online, and I hope to see you guys in the future again in person.
We hope.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dawn. It was great hanging with you, at least online. We'll see each other soon, definitely. Thanks.
Yes.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.